Tony, Jordan, it's good to see you again. We're here for the May market update. We've met with our investment consultants, Evergreen, last week and made some changes to the portfolio. So we wanted to talk a little bit about the main change we've made and also a bit of an update in what has been a very positive 4 weeks in share markets since we last did one of these videos. But yeah, the tariff talk has smoothed out a little bit, and we've taken advantage of a bit of a Boxing Day sale, as we call it. So we'll talk a little bit about one of the changes we made in our Australian equity sleeve. And Tony, did you maybe want to get started on that and how things have recovered in what we saw as a bit of a Boxing Day sale event about 5 weeks ago?
Yeah, I think it's always a case of that when there's, that bit of fear in the market, there's always creates opportunities. And when we last spoke, we did speak about the fact that the US did have to make some radical changes, and they had the mandate to be able to do it in respect to the having the political clout where they could actually make decisions, and of course the tariffs. And if you've ever read Donald Trump's Art of the Deal, which I must admit I haven't, but I've read snippets of it. Basically, he goes in hard and he goes in boisterous, and we kind of all know that, and he negotiates it down. But at the end of the day, he always gets a better deal than what he had. And even if you think of China, the markets did panic when he started speaking about 145% tariffs, and rightfully so. The market had a bit of a
Yeah.
panic. No, thankfully we didn't. And it was interesting that when we did put out that video, we spoke about the Boxing Day sale event, and the very next day the markets went up drastically. I think you and I, Vaughan, we bought a bit of NDQ, the Nasdaq 100.
Yeah, we certainly
Uh,
did. I mean, we couldn't have predicted that Trump's Twitter handler was going to tweet "great time to buy." A few hours after we made that video, so that was a stroke of
yeah,
good fortune. But
I know. So what you're saying is we didn't have any inside information.
yeah,
No.
no, no, not this time. Yeah,
No, but it's interesting though, isn't it? Because when there's you can panic when the market does sell off because of fraud, and so I am old enough and still have scars from the GFC, and when fraud does occur, that's when you just don't know what's going to occur. What happened is what's going to happen. And same with COVID, and this time round it was a pretty decent sell-off. But if we just go back a couple of years, it was the same, with Russia and Ukraine. It was a pretty decent sell-off. But
yeah,
you don't even think about it now. It was just like you sprained your little finger. It's not even a thought process anymore. And these things just do always happen. The market doesn't go up like that. It does go up like that. But
that's
every time, and
exactly.
yeah, and every time an opportunity is created, it's created. But if we actually have a look at the month, the numbers, I only know the numbers off the top of my head to the 12th of May, so about a week old. But in saying that, the last week's still been pretty good. Um, the all the losses for the year to date are all now positives.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
we're all,
and
all the indexes are now under positive.
yeah, and I think this has been a really good example of how trying to pick the bottom and selling out with a view of trying to get back in is really a fool's game, because that day, April the 9th, was actually the biggest single day gain in the S&P 500 since the GFC. So, in the event that you were thinking, okay, well, the market's fallen 15% over the last 6 weeks, I better get out and wait till it recovers. Well, you could have missed just one day and missed out on a 9.5% gain, which is, that's a decent year. Nine and a
Well,
half
well,
percent
well,
in
e-
one day.
well, even if you have a look at just our 70/30 fund, which is our most conservative fund, I think for the month, for the rolling 4 weeks to the 12th of May, it earns, I think it was 6.1%.
Mm.
Now, so a 70/30 fund realistically net of fees over the space of a 12-month return is usually about 7.5. So it pretty much earns an entire year's return in the space of a month. But that's the opportunity that these Boxing Day sale events actually do have. And over time, once again, if you go back and just run your finger over the 1987 share market crash, it's not even a little blimp.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
even a bump in the road anymore. So, even if you go back
Even
to
March 2020 now, even just over 5 years ago, you can barely notice the COVID crash, which at the time was enormous. 30%.
that's right,
But you barely notice it on the S&P 500 graphs now.
or the tech wreck, or or the any of the major ones that sort of got that sort of 15-year history. Even the 2008 GFC. You go back and you hover over it, it's a 50% drop.
Yeah,
You go up though. It's a massive.
I can
It's a massive
show the
drop in
numbers
that
if you
day.
want.
So yeah,
I
if
can
you've
show
got them
the
there,
graph.
John. Yeah, if you've got. Okay, so let's go back to that 2008 mark. If you just have a look there, it's not that much. It doesn't look that big until you actually run it down, say from the top to drag it down. It's about 50% drop.
yeah, it's over 1,500 points to in the 800s.
Yeah,
So yeah,
42.7% there.
yeah.
So there you go. So now that you had $1 million, you just saw $500,000 get wiped off. You're panicking, gone to cash. You've just
Mm.
lost out and probably about just drag it up from the bottom there if you went to cash.
Where are we going to?
Let's go right up to the top with dips and all. So it's you've just missed out on 682% return from the bottom. So and it's if you actually went to cash. So as Vaughan said, trying to pick the bottom. So if you panicked and went to cash, your $500,000 is probably just on the cash rates, because cash rates were worth nothing for such a long period of time. 500 grand might be worth 550 grand. So.
Yeah,
It's
that's it.
so I think the thing is though is that the last month was exceptional. Have a month like that every month, geez, it would be great. But there was an oversale. Where are the markets now? I'm still very comfortable where we're sitting on the Australian market and the US market, which are predominantly our two largest holdings that we have in the portfolio in respect to regions.
Yeah. And we did
But
make a few changes just last month, just tinkering with rebalancing and adding a little bit of hedging to the international side.
yeah,
And last week we met again with the investment committee and just made one change on the Australian equity side. So, Jordan, if you wouldn't mind bringing that up. So, we've left the international equities for the last kind of 5 weeks since that time. And then this one change we've made was just removing DNR Capital, one of the managed funds in our Oz equity side of the portfolio, and adding the Beta Shares Australian Quality.
in
And
fairness, we have had them on the watch list for probably around about 6 to 9 months now,
yeah,
Yeah.
we have. So we've done some. Evergreen have done a lot of analysis, and we've been discussing it for some time. But we have actually made the change now in the portfolios. And I mean, one of the reasons that DNR has lagged over the last couple of years really is that they've been quite stubborn in their lack of exposure to the big four banks. And they've had no exposure to CBA, to Commonwealth Bank, and that has really lagged on their performance. And one stat that we were noting that I heard at a conference last week was that CommBank shareholders across their whole share registry are over 90%, CommBank believe, over 90% of their shareholders are completely insensitive to the actual share price, and that's for a variety of reasons. And I think it's something like 48% of their shareholders are actually not, they have no objective to sell because they're retirees. They've got, a lot of unrealized capital gains on there, and they're just using the dividends as income. I think about 12% of shareholders are offshore, so they're not comparing the PE ratio to NAB or Westpac or ANZ. They're just comparing against the MSCI World Index in US dollars. Then another 15% was just held in index funds. So they're just buying and selling index. And then the interesting part was that another 16% of these shares are held by managers who have to have a certain exposure to the benchmark, and so they have to be plus or minus a certain amount of plus or minus 2%, for example, to their actual benchmark as part of the mandate. So they actually can't go too far low on Commonwealth Bank. So you add all that up, only 10% of CommBank shares are actually being traded, and that's why even when it trades at a really high PE ratio, it doesn't get sold by most people. So and in the last couple of years, we've seen that's not that just the only reason, but that is one of the main reasons why.
Oh, but but it's very legitimate, and we do have one client who has over 7-figure exposure to CBA shares direct, which he will never sell, I can assure you. But his average purchase price, excluding dividend reinvestment, is $5.25.
Yeah. And the dividends are a sure thing, and if you sell them, you're going to have a big tax bill. So why would you?
Even with a 50% discount, it is absolutely massive. Absolutely massive. So
so what we're looking at here is just a sector exposure. So this just breaks down a little bit of how really in the financials, there's slightly more financials being held by the new ETF that we're going for. And one of the reasons we're going for it is because it is, the relative performance has been a lot stronger. And we like this style of a listed ETF with a lower fee than DNR as well, which brings down the overall cost of the portfolio. And we just think that over the long term, it's going to be a greater benefit than DNR, which we have given a chance for some time now.
A bit more diversified, whereas DNR is a lot more concentrated. It's a little bit more diversified as well. And it's slightly more expensive, not much, probably about 15 basis points more expensive than index funds. So you want it to outperform the index, and it has by about 1.5% to 1.8% per annum over the last 3 years that it's been around as well. So if you are going to buy an active manager that's not much more expensive, and it's outperformed quite well, that's a good thing.
Exactly right. Yeah. And Jordan, if we can just take a quick look at the top 10 holdings, because even the top 10 holdings in this ETF, AQLT, let's have a look here. So, they've got the index is currently 10.8% CommBank. So, CommBank really has grown a lot in the last couple of years to take up such a large chunk. So even this quality index, because it is a rules-based ETF, it's still slightly under benchmark, but it's not zero, for example, like DNR is.
Still nearly 40% underweight CommBank shares.
Yeah. So, they're definitely, I think it's a pretty widely held that the PE ratio on CommBank has got pretty high, but, as we just talked about, they're sticky shares. So in the top left there, the top 10 holdings of the new ETF that's going to be in there, they're all large cap companies. So it is still a mid to large cap ETF. So we've removed, this is the 70/30. We've removed 5.5% of the portfolio from DNR and into the new Beta Shares ETF, and that's the only change that we've made at the moment. So we're, Tony, overall pretty comfortable with where things are at, albeit we're only one headline away from a shock to the market as ever.
That's just no differently than any other day, Monday to Friday.
Exactly
actually, no. It's a new age. You stop behaving like an old man. It's one tweet away nowadays, Vaughan.
That's right. Yeah.
That's my job in here. Stop trying to take my job. I'm the old man.
Yeah. So that's about it for me at the moment. But hope you enjoyed.
Thank you.